Reading off, God, grant me the serenity, accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now our main speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Walt from Laguna Niguel.
Thank you, Danny. Yeah. Thanks, Danny. I'm Walt. I'm an alcoholic. Walt. And I don't have to read anything behind any filter or anything. I'm good here. All right. Well, anyway, I'm Walt. I'm an alcoholic, and I want to thank Alan for drafting me into doing this, and it's an honor. It's an honor to be at a meeting this size, and to see all you shiny, happy people, from Manhattan Beach. And this is great. And it's a privilege, to get the opportunity to find. Yeah, I'm not loud enough. It's a privilege it's a privilege to have the opportunity to make some sense out of my life, and I'm like my own favorite topic anyway. So, and thank you, Chuck, wherever Chuck vanished to. Chuck always gets me thinking about my lack of thinking. That's usually what Chuck gets me thinking about. So. I don't know if my story is any different than anybody else. We all have stuff. We all have. We all have like troublesome emotions and reasons why we drank. So if you hear me talk about something and you go, well, I don't have that. Not everybody's going to have my set of afflictions, but. I often hear people talk about how, and is there a clock here besides this poor man?
Back there.
Right there.
Ah, good, thank you. A lot of us talk about how like we didn't feel like we quite fit in, or like we felt like an outsider sometimes as kids, or we were uncomfortable. And I probably would have had that, I was probably a touchy, fearful kid. And on top of that, my folks moved around a lot, right? So we lived in Australia, and then in Germany, New Jersey. Anybody would drink if they spent time in Jersey. And then England, and so my accent was goofy. In Germany, of course, I really couldn't speak. And by the time I was becoming an adolescent, my folks' marriage broke up, and then we moved back to Philadelphia, which is another very optimal place to learn how to drink. And Is there feedback from my artificial hip? I don't know. That's not the worst we're going to hear tonight. So, people, So anyway, so every couple of years as a kid, I would lose my friends. We'd move away. It would take me a year or two to get like reacclimated and make friends again, and then we'd move away. And I went through the same type of thing. And then by the time I'm starting junior high school, also my father went away. So that was just kind of my upbringing. And on top of feeling like an outsider, which actually I literally was an outsider most places I was living, I also like developed a wicked speech impediment. So that's we we talk about feeling a little bit different than our fellows. Well, I really was different, and I probably would have felt that way anyway. But like when you add a stutter to it, and I'm new. I'm new back in the States. I was always a little off kilter, and somewhere in there, during high school, probably 16 or so, I started to discover like the therapeutic benefit of drinking, right? As a junior into my senior, I dated a girl who was like well out of my league, and then I found drinking to be very helpful, just to like help me get over heartbreak or being underappreciated or whatever it was, and I gravitated to people who drank like me, anyway. That romance didn't go well, and oddly enough, my mom was going through her midlife crisis, and she moved my sister and I out here to Dana Point, and then I missed it, and so I'm in this beautiful place, right? I'm from Philadelphia, right? And I missed this girl terribly, and I felt guilty, and so as soon as I turned 18, I got on a bus and I went back to Philadelphia, and I was I can hear the groans. I understand. I was telling Chuck, you won't hear that story anywhere else, right? I know lots of people who were from the East Coast and took a bus out here. I'm the only one I've ever heard of who took a bus back, and I was trying to reconcile with the young lady, but in the back of my mind I had a plan B, and that was being able to drink with my friends, right? And so here you see me now. So I only share any of that in that. A lot of people, I hear like a lot of people, and I've seen it in my family, where folks drink successfully for a while, and then they cross some invisible line, and then they have a little, and then they start having it's fun with problems, and then problems. I crossed that line at about 18 and 1 month old, I think, right? And I was just drinking Adam, and I was still young enough, and my body processed alcohol well enough, like that I was able to hold down like a little dipshit job. I'm sorry, pardon my French adjectives. And but alcohol was very important to me. I can remember. I think I'm maybe 19 or 20 years old, and we had a snow day, and so when I say snow day, this isn't like school. I was working, but it was impossible to get my car out of the parking lot, and it was like 5 miles or whatever from work, and so we called, and I said, I can't get there, and they said, no problem, nobody else is getting here either, right? It's just ice on the ground and snow, and I said, okay, thanks, and I'm thinking, this is great, right? It's a snow day, it's a Monday, and it dawned on me, me and my roommate, that we were out of beer. So we're in the snow, or like we've got a day off, but we've got nothing to drink, and we've got no way of getting anywhere. And I thought, like, what are we going to do? And my roommate Brian said, well, I've got a set of keys or a set of skis. And I said, well, I've got a dining room table. So we literally took the top off the dining room table, and we drilled holes through the tabletop and the skis, and we built a sled. And we hiked like 6 miles to a beer distributor in a different town. And like the owner wanted to call Action News and have them interview us and stuff, and I thought I didn't really want any exposure, but that was it was a great hike, you know, like a self-made Iditarod just to buy beer, and it never dawned on me like that it might be the sign of problems to come. So anyway, yeah, it's, you know, that was the priority, you know, at which I put my ability or my necessity for drinking. Yeah, so you always hear in here, you know that it's fun, and then it's fun with problems. I pretty much had problems right away, you know, and I was broke, and I was driving these like disreputable cars, and I think every car that I owned, at some point, I just abandoned it. I don't think I ever sold a used car. It would finally break down, and I'd say, okay, that's it, I'm sick of you, and I would just leave it. And it's Philadelphia, like those cars will stay for months. But, you know, life went on, you know, my opportunities at work like started to narrow. I was probably a pretty lousy boyfriend, and I also had like no coping skills at all, and somewhere in my later 20s, I thought I was making like a sensible decision, you know, and I broke up. I'm acting like it's my decision. I don't really know, but I broke up with the girl I was seeing, and I believe like she was dating like somebody else within like 6 or 7 hours, and I started getting DUIs just like right away. You know, I like shifted into overdrink, and now this is my new standard, and you know, this is after Mothers Against Drunk Driving, so I've got to start doing a sentence someplace. And I went to a rehab to avoid being like somebody's cellmate for 30 days, and I still wasn't really like looking at my problem, right? I still thought drinking was a solution. And, you know, I should also say too, you know, I brought that stutter with me into early adulthood, and, you know, like when I drank, at least the first couple of years like that I drank, I would become fluent, you know. I wouldn't be worried about how I sounded. I wouldn't be worried about people judging me. And I actually thought alcohol was helping. You know, I think I was ignoring the fact that after about 10 years of drinking or so, something like that, I think I'm like slurring my words immediately, and I'm stuttering. So it's like a combination stutter, slur. It's like a slutter, you know, and I look like a walking problem, you know, and. Anyway, so I'm in this rehab, and they tell me about the nature of our malady, and I'm not really willing to listen. You know, I still think that you know that the drinking life is what's affording me any fun. I'm you know I really don't quite grasp the fact that this is a progressive disease. I was always pretty sure, like that I was an alcoholic, but when they read those two halves of the first step, I don't think I was willing to say that my life was unmanageable. Right? I think I was trying to find some kind of a like soft landing space, you know, but anyway. at the rehab, they would bring in meetings and stuff, and you know, and they would you know, like they would plead with us like to try to get an open mind, you know, and like try to see what's possible. But I really couldn't see it. And worse than that, they would pass the book around. I remember one big book meeting we had. They were passing around the book, and so now I had to read in public, and it just wasn't happening. Right? I was just frozen. And I thought, this is going to be bad enough, right? That like you want me to be sober and to be awake and looking at my awful life. And now on top of that, I'm going to be embarrassed at these meetings, and I'm not going to be able to read in public. And I just said, there's just no effing way I can't do this, right? Like, this is not for me. And folks recommended, you know, like that I work on finding a higher power, and I figured this is the way God made me, right? Like, this is the genetic cesspool that I come from, you know, and I'm gonna behave like this is my fate, you know, and yeah. So I was talking about how I thought like drinking was, you know, like my only opportunity to have fun and to be out with people and stuff. Well, you know, now I've got just a tiny little bit of AA in my mind, and the drinking is really no longer fun. But I am drinking, right? And I had friends who would say, Walt, you know, like, why don't you abstain when you're home and then just drink when you're out with us? And I would think, I only get arrested when I'm out with you. You know, that doesn't really make any sense. So I just isolated. You know, I just stayed home and gained weight. You know, I drink till midnight, then eat a TV dinner or something if I didn't pass out and have it explode in the microwave, and like that was my life, right? I was just I was getting more and more miserable, and I really never looked at the alcohol. You know, if there's any through line here in what I'm talking about, if there's any theme, it's that we shouldn't listen to ourselves. You know, we're unreliable narrators. You know, like Chuck mentioned earlier. You know, we need a group conscience, like, just to get through life, right? But I was on my own. And I was still working, and I was drinking every night. I wasn't really going anywhere. I wasn't meeting anybody. You know, that's the other thing too, right? I was drinking ostensibly to mix with people and be in bars and to chase girls and stuff. But I'm just sitting at home, you know, it just getting big, you know, yeah, it was bad. What I was really hoping would happen is that 7 years would elapse from my last DUI. And at seven, you know, I had 2 DUIs in a short amount of time, and I thought if I make it for 7 years, then the state of Pennsylvania is going to drop them from my record, and now I can, if I do happen to get pulled over, it would be a first offense, right? Now, I don't know if there's anybody in here who's as insane as I was, but that was the peak. That was the pinnacle of my ambition, right? It was not to be a team lead or a vice president at the bank where I worked. You know, the pinnacle of my ambition was to make it to 7 years and to get back to a first offense. You know, I could do a first offense, right? That'd be easy. And you know what's coming? So at 6 years and 11 months, I've got a bag packed in my car, and I drop my buddy off, and I go back to the bar in a blackout, and I get a third DUI in Pennsylvania. And that was my reaction, too. And I never counted the fourth DUI in Jersey. They said, we're going to suspend your license in Jersey. You can't ever come back. I said, good. I don't want it. You can have my license in Jersey. But I'm now looking at 3 DUIs in Pennsylvania, and now I've got to do time somewhere, right? I've got to do 90 days, and I don't know what's going to happen, right? And the bank for which I worked for 20 years is being sold, and I'm broke, and I've got to look for a job, and I am sweaty, bloated, and fearful, and I'm a mess, right? And I'm just, I heard Chuck talk a little bit about a moment of clarity like that he had. I was a stubborn Irishman. I didn't really have any clarity, right? But I was in a suit, I think, and I was handcuffed behind my back, and I was in a freezing cold jail cell at 36 years old, maybe, and I just said, this life really isn't working out very well. I just I didn't have another answer, right? I was going to be taking my baggage anywhere I went, but I knew that the path I was on wasn't. It just wasn't going anywhere, right? And so anyway, I thought, well, maybe I should just try to stop on my own, right? Even if I can't do AA, I can at least dry out. And I took like 4 weeks off, and then I would drink, and then I'd take 3 weeks off or 5 weeks off, and then I'd drink. And I was awaiting sentencing for this DUI, and I so I think I was even more afraid than I usually am. But I noticed, right, that even if I'm dry or I'm abstaining, and I don't have a program, I don't have a higher power, I don't have a sponsor, I don't have anything. It's just Walt, and I'm facing the world, and it dawned on me as I'm walking to work. I did a lot of walking. All of my cars were gone or at the side of the road somewhere where I left them. But it dawned on me that, if I drink on a Saturday, on Sunday I'm probably still wobbly and drunk. On Monday I'm walking to work, and I'm thinking, all right, I can do this. I feel pretty good, And then Tuesday, I'm patting myself on the back. What a man you are, Walt. You're not drinking. You're the cat's meow. And Wednesday, I start thinking, well, that girl didn't call me back, and that meeting at work didn't go well. And then by Thursday, it's this is really a penance I'm doing here, being sober. And by Friday, it's like, it's like a jinx, and I'm being punished, and I can't wait to start drinking again. And then if I drank, then it's the same thing all over again. And so I realized that even, at the optimal I'm like rate of my drinking, where I'm getting in the least amount of trouble and I'm abstaining for the most amount of time, I am just thinking about alcohol all the time, right? It just owns it owns the mortgage on my brain pan. You know what I mean? It's like I'm just constantly thinking about booze. And anyway, that was my state probably for 7 months or so, and then I was sentenced, and I got very, very lucky. I had to do 90 days someplace, and they gave me house arrest. And if anybody ever gets house arrest, I highly recommend it. What it did was it gave me time. I had to be dry, right? Because they could come and they could take urine or blood, or they would audit my freezer, or so I had to be dry. And I thought, well, I've done a month, maybe I can do 2 or 3. But it gave me a clear indication of like how quickly my thinking gets very squirrely, right? On my own, I start thinking about all the things that's wrong with my life, and why I need some kind of an escape, and what things are petrifying me in the future. Anyway, I also found a home group, and my anniversary is in January, and so my first year, and like congratulations to the birthdays and anniversaries in here. My first year, we all stood up, at the front of the meeting, and everybody got sober on January 1st, except for me, right? I was January 5th. And we went through, there was like 15 January 1st, me, and a bunch of, and a friend of mine walked up after the meeting, and he has his arms out, and I think he's going to tell me what a hero I am, And he says, why couldn't you get sober on the 1st? And I said, well, it's because my house arrest started on the 5th, right? So I still have that date, right? That's the date, like where this thing got started for me. So anyway, I don't wish house arrest on anybody, but it's wonderful. And I had like a house full of like books and movies and stuff. A friend of mine once picked me up for a meeting, and like he looked at my walls, and he says, Walt, he said, like, you're a varsity isolator, aren't you? And I said, I don't know, maybe. I didn't. He told me to get numbers from guys at meetings, and I don't know what kind of expression I had on my face, but he said, Walt, he said, like, you don't like people, do you? And I said, I think I like people, but it dawned on me after he said that, and the fact that I'm not going to be getting numbers from guys, and I'm not going to get numbers from anybody if I'm not drinking, but it dawned on me, that I like people, but I like my people. Like, I've already got enough people, right? I've already got enough friends. I don't need more friends. What I don't like, and it's not that I don't like anything. I'm afraid of being judged by any new people, right? So it's just the idea of new people that makes me antsy. So if you don't shake our hands after the meeting, I understand. I'm good. But you guys taught me like how to grow up, right, and not let these fears of the outside world like just consume me, right? There was somewhere in there. I was not very comfortable with God. I don't know. That's kind of that's a euphemism. I was very angry at God. If it was my old Catholic God, I was pissed, right? I didn't ask to have a stutter. I didn't ask to have this bad skin, or to be broke, or to be an alcoholic, or to have the life I'd had up to that point. So you guys told me, to find a higher power. And when I was brand new, it was just Walt and his bad attitude, and it was January in Philadelphia, and I'm looking outside the window thinking, really, is this it, right? Is this, I didn't realize I was at that jumping off point, right? I just couldn't imagine a life that didn't involve drinking, and I couldn't imagine a sober life, and I just thought, I'm not sure where this thing is going to go, or for how long it's going to last. But somewhere in there, those people who were picking me up and taking me to meetings and like criticizing my living room, and I just kind of leaned in. I relied on the fellowship, And I figured if God's going to talk to me, right, he's not going to set a bush on fire in my front yard, right? I'm going to hear something from other people. And so that's what I tried to do, And so, my second and third step, I think, like the first time I went through, my second step was probably more just about the program, and the fellowship. But somewhere in there, I also, I just found a way to surrender, right? I can remember I got a new job where I had to talk to people on the phone, also with this speech pathology. What I really hated to do was to talk to strangers on the phone. So I got a job talking to strangers on the phone. And I was just so uncomfortable, right? And I'd be on the 44 bus going to work, my prayers, were always, they were more like belligerent demands, right? It was more like I would say to the heavens, or like whoever was in charge, I would say, just how about some help with the fear, right? I mean, I knew I was anxious, right? And I would just say, just how about some help with that? And I don't know if I called God buddy or Pancho or what I said, but I was just looking for something. And invariably, even that type of arrogant plea, my day went better. And I don't know, I guess it was some form of like humbling myself. I don't know what it was, but in a sense, it was a second step taken on the 44 bus in downtown Philadelphia. And that's sort of how my program just kind of unfolded. I don't, I wasn't I was not, on a pink cloud, right? I was in despair, for the first couple weeks maybe, and I was on house arrest for the first 3 months. And, so instead of a pink cloud, I had something more like a brown mist, but, I guess I had to go to work. I had to just kind of lean into this program, and I had to act as if, right? And I also had to drop my old cynicism, right? All those years I've been drinking, especially like the last 7, I had just gotten so negative. I don't know. I was not an American martyr, but I was an American victim, I think is what I was, but like somewhere along the line, if people are telling me that my life's going to get better, right, and that I have a higher power, like that I can have some semblance of faith in, then why be so negative? Like why not act like something good might happen, right? If I'm at least a tiny bit optimistic, maybe I'll recognize something good like when it actually happens. And anyway, that's how things kind of went, early on. And I also, that second step prayer, on the 44 bus was a form of surrender. This speech impediment that I've been bugging you guys about, I only mention it because I think like lots of people have like fears of public speaking and stuff like that. And I was telling Alan, I often worry that I'll get up here and if the stutter gets bad, you'll be going home and your wife will say, how's the 40-minute speaker, and you guys can say, oh, it was good. He got out about 31 sentences. But what I finally just did was just say, like, F it, I'll just, if I stutter, I stutter, right? It's not going to kill me. It may bore you to tears, but it's not going to be like the end of my world. And I realized that I had been like a juvenile all my life. I had been so consumed with what other people thought, if I fit in, I was still thinking like that 14-year-old as a guy in my mid-30s. So I guess that's another theme. Like, don't wait till your mid-30s. If you're young, you're wrong now. You don't have to wait to be wrong and broke and in trouble, right? You can just come in and like things will get better. But I'm, as like Chuck mentioned too earlier, I'm still an alcoholic, right? What do I have left? 5?
10 minutes.
10?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've got decades to cover. No, I'm only teasing. This story doesn't get much better. I can, I'm still an alcoholic, right? And I'm still distrustful of God, even though I claim to, like to have my act together. But there was one period where that job I had, where I was so uncomfortable, they put a beeper on me and they kept me up. They would beep me like every 90 minutes, and I had all night long, and so I had like no sleep for about 2 years. And I'm sober, but I'm going batty, right? Right. I'm nuts, and so I go to the employee assistants, and I'm saying this not to brag, but if you ever need outside help, go get it. And they said, go out on disability, Walt. And I said, really? I've been sober like 3.5 years. Do I have? But I did. I just needed to sleep. So I went home and I put on the bathrobe like a Tony Soprano walking around on lithium, and I'm just resting, right? And I did a couple job interviews. I sent out resumes. I still try to do like a little bit of footwork, but my time is like running out on disability, so I'm not going to be able to pay rent, but I still like being home, and being idle. And I interview for a job down in Delaware. So I drive down to Delaware, I interview with this firm, and they seem okay. I just asked them questions, and then I drove home. But it dawns on me, that I don't want the job, but I don't want to be turned down. Like, I want them to offer me a job, but I don't want to take it. Right? I'm still an alcoholic, right? And so like a good alcoholic, what I do is I hide, right? I don't answer the answering machine. I don't pick up emails, right? I just hide from everything. And that way, if I don't get turned down and I don't get offered, I'm fine. Well, anyway, about 4 days later, I finally get like enough guilt and anxiousness. I said, I better just hit the answering machine. This is back in the day when like you had a little button to push, and I hit the answering machine, and it's like this headhunter woman. She goes, Walt, she goes, they really liked you. Like, would you mind sending me references? And like, give me a call back. And I said, oh yeah, all right, fine. And then like the next message, it was the same woman, Walt, this is Jerry again. I didn't hear from you. I'm still looking for you to fill out this paperwork and to send me a list of references. And then the next message was, Walt, I talked to our friends Bernadette and Ralph, and they wrote these like these like glorious references for you, and I think this company wants you, right? And I'm still listening to all these messages, and then the next one was like they want to make you an offer, and then the next one is, Walt, they want you, and your first day is June 21st. And the next message is my insurance company who's paying me disability, and they say, Mr. Hatch, this is Allstate or State Farm, whoever it was. Mr. Hatch, this is the insurance company calling to let you know that your benefits are ending, and your last day is June 21st. And I thought, like, what the what? Like, now I can't turn the job down, right? I mean, if God's going to go to all that trouble just to line up my references, I'll take the damn job. So, and it's just stuff like that, right? It's just stuff like that all of a sudden just like, give me a shot, I also made my 8-step list, and I didn't listen to my sponsor on my first one. I did one I wanted to do that he didn't want me to do, and that went really terribly. Like, that went very, very badly, and then after that, I just said, okay, I'm going to do what my sponsor says. I'm going to put the people like to whom I owe and amend, like in an order from very easy, to more difficult. And there was one friend of mine, Joanne, who was just one of the crowd. Right, there was nothing romantic, right? We were just, we were just friends. And I, in a drunken argument, I had said something, and then I never saw her again. And anyway, she's at the top of the list. It's an easy apology, right? I was out of line, and but I have no idea how to find her, right? And I don't know her married name. I don't know where she works. I know she's a lawyer someplace, but I don't, I have no idea. But anyway, though, like, she's on the list, and my like belligerent prayers, my prayers like still had a bit of an edge to them, right? And it was, and I'm on that 44 bus. I can remember this is maybe year 2 or something, and I'm we're in a blizzard, right? And like, we're going into town, and I got a loose leaf binder open, and I'm going through, and I said to God, God, if you want me to do this amend, right? This is unlike the first one I did where I was sure I was in the right, right? I'm saying, God, if you want me to make this amend, I'm like, please just let me know how to find her, right? Or like how to go about finding her. And that was the extent of it, right? I figured, again, it's just a question of surrender, right? And so that's the prayer. If you want me to do this, God, just like help me figure out like how to locate her. And I got off the 44 bus at 17th Street, and I stepped across a snowdrift, and Joanne was standing right there.
Oh my God.
And I hadn't seen her in 17 years, and anyway, that was another one of those, right? It was just like, Walt, like, what the heck are you doing arguing, right? Walt, like, just get with it. So anyway, I've only got a couple minutes left, and I just wanted to thank you guys again for like having me out here. My life was a lot different back then, right? I had a car that was broken down where I worked, right? So I got to see the car, but I didn't get to drive it, right? I got to walk by it. I had no license for years, right? I got my first new car, I think sober, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. I'm probably 42 years old. And I drove it out here, right? And I took a few months off, and I put like 9,000 miles on my car driving out here. I came out here to be close to my sister's family with her kids, and I was here, I don't know, maybe 2 years, and they moved back to Philadelphia. So things don't always work out, like as we plan. But you guys taught me like how to be an adult. I mean, how to roll with the punches, and I would not have found any comfort in this life on my own. On my own, I was going to be very, very miserable, and very grumpy, and you'd be lucky to get like 30 sentences out of me on a long ass talk like this, and whatever I am, right? I'm not, this like retired balding man with like no pigment in his beard. I wouldn't be here if not for AA, right? And I don't even worry about like not being here. I wouldn't have any comfort outside of this fellowship, right? Outside of you guys, I'm going to get squirrely, and I'm going to make myself up. I'm going to become miserable enough to where like drinking makes sense, and I don't ever want to be back at that spot again. So thanks for letting me share.